Hey guys, thank you for joining us for this week's DC Kids lesson. Today we're going to learn about Joseph. What a wonderful story. Joseph, from the time he was a little boy, you can see that God's hand is on his life. That's why our top truth this week is God's plans are good. I'm going to say that again. God's plans are good. So we start there. God's plans are good. Let's see how exactly. With Joseph's life, it seems like he goes through a lot of rough stuff. I mean, from the time he was a little boy, his own family sold him into slavery, kicked him out of the house. People coming by, wrapped him up in a cage. He was a goner. Through his life continues. He gets a job working in a palace for Potiphar, a guy who's in charge of a lot of the land. He's the big shot. But what happens to Joseph? Potiphar's wife comes along, tries to get with him and say, hey, you and me, let's make a little something special here. And Joseph's like, what are you talking about? And then she accuses him of making advances at her and destroys his life, destroys his credibility. So that's already two shots against Joseph. And he goes into prison and he spends a lot of time there with other people in prison. And it seems like his life's going to be pretty bleak. But then what happens even after that? Joseph gets another chance. We can see still that God's plans are good. He gets his job back and some after that. He's in charge of the entire nation for Potiphar. And Joseph's family, he comes back into the picture. They don't even recognize him at first. He looks completely different. He's powerful, he's large and in charge, but it's all because of God and because his plans are good. And what does he say to his family? He looks them dead in the eye and he says, you intended it to harm me, but God intended all of this for good. Joseph, his whole entire life, he was secure in one thing, that he was in God's hands. Now, I got a cool way I want to show you. Check this out. So these two things right here, one hand sanitizer and the other scissors. So both of these things are really, really useful. But if I just set them out of my hand, if I never pick them up and put them in my hand, what are they for? They're for nothing. I can't cut anything unless I use my hand and cut paper or whatever it is. I can't clean my hands with this hand sanitizer unless I squeeze it out. I'm putting it in my hands, rubbing it around, and now my hands are clean. In just the same way, nothing would have come of Joseph's life unless he knew and unless he surrendered to the fact that his life was in God's hands. God was the one working and taking all these things seemingly terrible, but transforming them into something that was beautiful and part of God's good plan. And we want the same for all of you watching. We want to surrender our lives to God, put our lives in his hands and say, God, I know that you're in control. I trust you. And so please make the most out of my life today. So that's our lesson. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, God's plans are good. He's the one that's with us.